When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "O unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus, "everything is possible for him who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out by prayer." Hello, welcome to the online message of Corinth Christian Church. This week I heard someone say that the year 2020, that date, will soon enter the American vernacular as an adjective. That people will start saying things like, "You're acting so 2020 right now," or "I'm getting ready to go all 2020 on you." There's been a lot of things that have gone wrong this year. And I'm not sure that any of them would have been as bad as they are, or maybe would have even happened if it hadn't have been for the biggest disaster that we faced, and that is COVID-19. It all started December the 31st, 2019. A call was received by the World Health Organization stating that the Chinese medical community were concerned about a cluster of strange cases of pneumonia in the city of Wuhan, China. Within 5 days, the numbers had risen to 59 cases in a city of 11 million. And in the beginning, they thought this wasn't that big a deal. I mean, this is less than 60 among 11 million. But within just a few short days, the numbers were growing and began to find itself had spread to other countries. And today, in some way or another, it's affected the human population of the entire planet. As of Thursday, almost 27.5 million people are infected. And not necessarily only those infected have been affected, because it set off a worldwide panic. According to the National Center for Health, in July of last year, 8.2% of the Americans showed signs of anxiety disorder. This July, 36%, almost a 30% increase. And a lot of those people that are suffering this anxiety are Christians. And so we're considering what Jesus said about don't be afraid, don't worry, don't take no thought of tomorrow. Peter said, cast all your cares on Him because He cares for you. How is it that we cannot be overwhelmed with care when there's this disease and all the ramifications of it? Is it a sin to feel dis-ease over this disease? Is it a sin to be afraid of the coronavirus? What about cancer? What about other health issues? Maybe you're not getting sick yourself, but you're burdened with worry over someone you love getting this virus. Yes, Jesus said, trust me, don't worry. But how do we do that when everywhere you look, someone's telling you to be afraid, to be very afraid? Well, I think we can look at one place we can look at is this story that's found in 3 out of the 4 Gospels. We're looking in Mark, the 9th chapter. It begins on the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus climbs the mountain with 3 of the disciples, those that are in his inner circle, Peter, James, and John. And while they're on this mountain, he reveals himself to them in his full glorious state. He becomes like he is when he's at the right hand of the Father. And not only is Jesus on this mountain, but Moses and Elijah are there as well. And so Jesus and these disciples have one of the most uplifting moments of ministry. It's a real mountaintop experience in the most literal sense. But you know what comes after that? They have to go down off the mountain into the valley. And sometimes valley experiences really stink. Here they are coming down with the voices of Moses and Elijah and even God himself, who said, "This is my beloved Son," still ringing in their ears. And they come down off the mountain into an absolute mess. When they get there, the other 9 disciples are arguing with the teachers of the law, and they're losing. The bad guys are ridiculing them and making them look foolish. And the crowd's just standing around eating it up. Jesus had left the other 9 disciples alone for one day, and somehow they've managed to lose control over everything. Jesus asked, "What's going on? What are you arguing about?" And neither the disciples nor the scribes want to answer. Probably because the disciples are embarrassed, and likely because the scribes know that they would be overmatched if they respond to Jesus. And so the most desperate man in the crowd answers for everyone. He speaks up and says, "My son is possessed by a demon. It's horrible. When the evil spirit takes him, he can't speak. He throws him to the ground. His body becomes rigid. His teeth are clenched. He's foaming at the mouth." And this man says, "I brought him to you, Jesus, but you weren't here, so I asked your disciples to cast this demon out, and they couldn't do it." Some say it was because of a lack of faith. A lack of faith on the part of the disciples, or a lack of faith on the part of the Father. And that's the reason that the Son is not healed. We'll get to that in a moment, but either way it hurts. It hurts because the response that we see that takes place here. We want to think of Jesus as loving people and wanting to be with them. But here he says, how long do I have to put up with this? How long do I have to keep dealing with this? He basically says, I just want to get away from this whole generation. That's kind of bothersome, you know it? Because I'm not sure that our generation has shown any more faith than theirs has. Does this mean Jesus doesn't want to be with us? We could talk a lot about that, but I want to look at what Jesus says next, because the 5 words that he says next changes everything. He said, "Bring the boy to me." And before he could take another step, I want you to realize that this father, on what had to be one of the most stressed out days of the entire life, when the sickness of his child that he loved overwhelmed him with worry, he found peace because Jesus said, "Bring him to me." And I think that's important because in our life right now, regardless of what we might be afraid of, Jesus still invites us to bring our illness, to bring our troubles, to bring our trials, and to lay them at his feet. Whether it's COVID-19 or heart disease or Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, cancer, whatever it might be, whatever disease is creating this sense of dis-ease in your heart, Jesus is saying, "Bring it to me." The invitation is open for every one of us. James 5:14 says, "Is any one of you sick? He should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well, and the Lord will raise him up. If he has sinned, he will be forgiven." You know, God is still the great physician. One of his names is Yahweh Rapha, which means the God who heals. Now, God uses pharmacists and surgeons sometimes to do that work. Sometimes he works miracles that medical experts can't explain. But it's always God who heals. And so they bring this boy to Jesus. And as soon as they bring the boy to Jesus, this demon sends him into these terrible convulsions. Jesus asks, "How long has he been going through this?" And they say, "Since a child." Sometimes the demon looks for a way to fire or water to throw him into to try to kill him. And so don't miss what's taking place here. Jesus is asking these questions, and all the time the Father's trying to explain while this boy is having a seizure. I mean, if it was us, we would stop the questions, we would stop and intervene with this young boy. Why isn't Jesus doing anything here? Why is He just asking questions? You can picture the Father saying, you're supposed to know everything. Don't you know how long He's been suffering? What difference does it make how long it's been? He's suffering right now. And so far, Jesus hasn't done anything about it. Maybe He wondered, are you going to fail and let this go like the disciples did? This is a big deal, because when we're overwhelmed with worry over a disease that we might be facing, or we're worrying over someone that we love and something they have to deal with, we need to bring it to Jesus. We need to pray and pray more. But then we have to have faith and to believe in God's ability to heal, even if in that moment nothing seems to make sense. The Father says here, if you can do anything at all to help. At that moment, He's not asking or expecting very much. Maybe just make the convulsions less violent. Maybe just give us a week off from suffering with them. Jesus answers, what do you mean? What do you mean if? Don't you realize everything is possible if you believe? And in that moment, it's what I believe is one of the most inspiring confessions of faith recorded in the Bible. Because this guy says, I do believe, but help me in my unbelief. Help me in my unbelief. I believe in You, Jesus, but here in the midst of my son's misery, I have my doubts. Doubts I don't want to have and don't want to admit even to myself. Those 9 disciples who claimed to be using Your power didn't exactly help this man's doubts disappear probably. So he's wondering if Jesus will be kind, if He will understand. See, this man's struggling with faith right now because he expected and hoped for something that didn't happen. He expected for his boy to be healed, but Jesus wasn't there. He expected more out of the disciples than what he received. To put it bluntly, what this man expected was he expected God to do something, and it hadn't happened. In his mind, God hadn't done anything. And he's disappointed in the way things turned out. If we could talk to this man and the truth be known, it might be that he was a little disappointed in God Himself. So right now, that belief is kind of hard for him to come by. He says, my faith isn't strong. But something tells him that Jesus is. And so he's holding on to this hope that Jesus can and will do something to help him and his son. It's an honest cry for help. And Jesus didn't rebuke him for it. Instead, He heals his son. And so today, you may believe that Jesus can heal any disease that you may have, or anyone that your loved one may ever face. But here's the hard part that I really wish we didn't have to face. We have to go into it with the realization and the wisdom that He might not choose to do so. Jesus is right. All things are possible. But just because everything's possible doesn't mean God will always do everything we want. Just because immediate physical healing is possible doesn't mean it's always in God's will. Sometimes we pray and we ask the elders to anoint with oil, and God just seems to do nothing while this disease just takes its course, and we hurt and suffer and we don't understand. It had to be hard for this father. When the convulsions start up, Jesus does nothing but ask questions. He lets the seizures continue for some time. And then when Jesus does something, it seems like it gets worse. When He tells the demon to come out of the demon sends the boy into what might have been the worst episode ever. And when it's over, everyone thinks the boy has died. He looks like a corpse. On the surface at this moment, it looks like Jesus killed this boy. It might be kind of hard to take this all in. And then He reaches down and helps him to his feet, and the boy is healed. His amazing power is shown in that everything is possible. No, sometimes things look bad, but in this case, it had a happy ending. But what about those times when the ending is not so happy? What do we do? Because we have to admit sometimes God does things we don't understand when it comes to physical healing. Being people of faith doesn't mean that we ignore the truth. And the truth is that some people are not healed. Some people die from their sickness. And if we believe that all things are possible with God, we have to admit He could have healed this boy with the disciples when the disciples tried and failed if He'd wanted to. We have to at least allow ourselves to ask the question, why does Jesus heal some people and He doesn't heal others? I mean, Jesus didn't heal every person that He met in the 33 years that He walked the planet. And the same thing's true for us. He doesn't always answer our prayers with a yes. And if you've ever asked the question why, you're not alone. You might be haunted by a story like the one of the lady named Meg Woodson. She lost both her children to cystic fibrosis and painful lingering deaths, wondering why God sat on His hands and did nothing while her daughter died. But in the end, she wrote that even in her children's death, we were upheld. God's love was so real, one could not doubt it or rail against its ways. Maybe it's like another woman who went through treatments for liver cancer, and in just a few months she would die from it. But just in a moment before that happened, she called her minister excited to say, I understand why God allowed me to be sick, so that I could bring Him glory as His missionary to other patients in the chemo ward. I'm reminded of a professor I had in college. His name was Dick Dameron. He was dying of cancer, and he told a friend, take a look at that Bible. You know what you find? The only promise God made to me in this life is that I get to live a better life in the next one. And that's enough. That's what faith looks like. Each of these people, along with people that you probably know and people you remember, found that faith to be truth, that sometimes God doesn't immediately bring physical healing, but for His people, He promises ultimate healing. In the end, in this story, Jesus healed the boy. I love the fact that He helped him to his feet so he could walk. Sometimes that's healing God gives. Just help you to your feet so you can walk again. Sometimes He allows the disease to run its course, and whether that disease is yours or someone you care about, He will help you. He'll help you walk through it. You don't have to be alone. Maybe He'll help you stand on arthritic feet or walk away from a still open grave in a cemetery. Either way, He's with you. We need to let that be our faith, that He will lift us up by our hand and help us to walk. That we need to keep believing that He can physically heal, but keep believing even if He doesn't choose to do so. Isaiah the prophet's words give us hope when times like this are hard to understand. Isaiah 57:1 says, the righteous perish, and no one ponders it in his heart. Devout men are taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. You know, with all this COVID-19 and all the restrictions that have taken place, one of the restrictions we're all aware of is that the nursing homes have been on lockdown. No one can go in and visit their families. And I've said several times that I'm thankful that my dad passed away a little over a year, almost 2 years ago, so that he was spared from this. And I've hurt for those families who have not been spared from this. But we need to understand that in the midst of all that's going on, that sometimes God doesn't heal us so that we can be spared from other things that may be happening. And because of that, we can use that faith to be lifted up, even if we're sick, even if we're afraid of becoming sick. We can trust Him even when nothing He's doing seems to make sense. You know, there's a lot of people who've decided that there can't be a God because they've prayed for someone to get well and they didn't. They say this world is too bad, too painful to have been created by a loving, compassionate God. And maybe the question we ought to ask is this: if you were God, what kind of world would you make? The answer would probably be one with no sickness, one where no one would die, where no one would grow old, where there wouldn't be any poor or homeless, no pain or grief. This past week on the Academy of Country Music, there was a guy that sang a song, said, "I wished I lived in a world where my grandpa didn't die." You know what? That's what kind of world God has made. The only thing is we're not there yet. But He's prepared a place for us. He's prepared a home for us like that. He wanted this world to be like that, but we messed it up because of sin. Because of sin, there is pain, there is sickness, there is hurt, there is worry. There are trials and tribulations. But He's prepared a place for us where all of that is going to be removed. All that's going to be taken away from us. And the thing is, we can be a part of that world. Yes, sin's going to cause some hurt and pain in this world, but we have a hope in Jesus of a place that is better, a place where there'll be no sorrow, there'll be no sickness, there'll be no hurt, there'll be no worry, there'll be no tears. And He wants you to be a part of that place. He's prepared a place for you there. And all you have to do is accept the gift that He's offered of salvation and eternity with Him. Why not do that today? Why not give your life to Him, to serve Him, to love Him, and wait for the day that He takes you home? It will help you in days like today when our world is going crazy. It'll make a difference in your life. It'll give you a sense of peace that the Bible describes doesn't make any sense. Peace that passeth understanding. This peace that doesn't make any sense. That's what God offers you today. And you can have that by accepting His offer to your life. If you have a decision to make, if you need to repent of your sins and confess Jesus and to be baptized, I invite you to call me today and to make that decision that will change your life and change your attitude. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, God bless you and take care. I love you.